All right, we have some breaking news, well, from Etsy, and it really wasn't intended for us Etsy sellers. Well, it was for the company, but it wasn't necessarily posted for us. They actually just came out with a report, and the report primarily was for stock investors to kind of let them know, how's the company doing? What are we doing to make it better? What are we doing to make it better for customers? What are we doing to, well, make it safer? And well, we all know that there's been some suspensions going on. And I think there's something in here that they said it was like over 3 million listings were suspended. So we're going to dig into this full report. And this was just posted, I believe, 2 days ago. There's a lot in this report, but good thing for you guys and me, we got someone like Chris Schaefer that loves this kind of stuff and just loves digging in and pulling out some of those, well, important things that are being said that could help us, or at least make us or help us understand what it means for us and the future of Etsy for us sellers. So Chris, I know you've been deep in the weeds looking through this report. How many pages was this report, by the way?
The report itself is not that long. It's like 20 pages.
Okay.
But what they did was buried the lead on everything because it's for investors, right? So they're like, look at all this really cool stuff that we're doing and using technology to do and totally doing it the right way and measuring all of the right things. And when you start to read through it, if you're reading through it with a little bit of a skeptical eye, or from a seller perspective rather than an investor perspective, then you start to read it a little bit differently. And Scott, I think one of the conversations you and I had a lot last year, and I think it's one of the reasons they got as aggressive as they did with this report, is one of Etsy's biggest hurdles was IP compliance, right? Making sure that people aren't selling counterfeit goods, that nothing shady is going on the platform, none of those kinds of things, right? And so this report, which they call their transparency report, is really designed for them to go to investors and go, look at all the things that we're doing to make sure that this stuff is not a problem. And it turns out that they're doing some things that are potentially a problem for sellers. You know, the numbers all look good, but the way that these things are happening is a little bit concerning, at least for you and I, when you start to drill into the actual numbers and think through this with a little bit of logic and common sense.
Yeah, well, I think and we're going to dig into the report, guys, and kind of pull out everything so you don't have to kind of dig through. We'll link it up, the link to it in the description. And let me know in the comments, have you seen this report yet? Have you seen it? Because Chris, where was it actually posted that we would be able to see it and find it? I know you're kind of like, really kind of listening into what's going on over there. Where did you discover it?
So they actually emailed me about it because I signed up for their investor notifications. So anytime somebody on their board sells a bunch of stock, right? Any of their executives want to sell some stock, they have to file an investor notification. When their quarterly reports come out, they have to file an investor notification. And they put out either a PDF or a presentation to say, hey, here's all of the information that you need to know about this one thing. And they have an investor news section on the site, but unless you sign up for their notifications, you kind of got to check it on a daily basis. Every day at market close, they send out whatever the news is for that day. They'll send out the stock at the end of the day. They'll send out any filings that happened, any reports like this come out. And so I think this came out, I believe, Tuesday. Or Wednesday, you and I started taking a look at it and said, hey, this is something that's actually kind of interesting. Like, if you read the report itself, it's super boring and not helpful until you start to pull out some of the numbers, and we can get a better idea of exactly what's going on and what Etsy is thinking when it comes to listing and shop suspensions, which is really what this report is all about. It's about marketplace cleanliness and safety. Right. They talk about their transparency and safety team, and that's really who's responsible for the listing takedowns and all.
Which Chris, after you shared with me, how many listings are being flagged by AI and how many people they have to sort through that. The number is staggering because there's no way it's humanly possible for a human to really inspect all of those listings. And that's kind of why we're seeing a lot of the same email template that's getting sent out, because it's just basically being forwarded. Yes, there's a human review, but that human review is like, oh yeah, there's another one. Click, template, push, send, right? So we're going to dig into that, but I was shocked by the number when we broke that down, and you guys are, maybe you're going to be as shocked. But I do also just want to say this, we're kind of coming at this like, look at Etsy, look what they're sharing. It's their transparency report. Like, oh my gosh, like it's not all bad. They are trying, and we're not saying that Etsy is a bad platform. We're not saying that at all. What we are saying is you do need to stay up to date on this stuff, right? And the best way to do it, if you don't like digging through all that stuff and geeking out on it, is just subscribe to our channel, because Chris does like all of that stuff. And he's a numbers guy and a percentage guy, and he just likes the data. So he's following the data and kind of distilling it down for us. So Chris, why don't we dig in? What's the first part that we want to that we want to address? I mean, I guess one thing I'll say here before you do, and maybe this will kind of tee it up for you. Is it accurate to say that Etsy is using AI to flag listings?
Now, interestingly, Scott, with all of the ways that they talk about using AI, they actually didn't use that word in this report, which is interesting. Okay. But they're calling it their automated systems, which is AI, right? Like if they can call gift mode AI, this is AI, because what they're doing is they're using an algorithmic approach, right? 10 years ago, we would have called this an algorithm. This is not a super intelligent robot that can do everything, but it's a way for them to look at patterns of behavior, right? They're using an algorithm to detect these things. And then supposedly it's going through a human review. And we'll get to that here in just a minute. But before they dove into any of the transparency stuff, Scott, one of the things they shared that was interesting, and these numbers do not match up exactly with the Q1 end of Q1 report, which is kind of interesting. But they said there's 90 million active buyers and 7 million active sellers. And I've been seeing a lot of comments recently where they're like, oh, Etsy says they have more sellers than buyers. And I'm like, I keep seeing numbers like this. So maybe more shops have been created over time or whatever, but there's 7 million active sellers. And if anybody at Etsy knows what that number is, it should be this team, right? This is the equivalent of YouTube or Facebook's trust and safety team. Right. They're the people who go, hey, your account's been hacked, or hey, this is an IP infringement, right? That group of people. The other interesting thing, and I'm not sure, Scott, because they don't disclose like exactly their budget allocation, but they mentioned that in 2023, they spent $50 million on their transparency team. Now, if they don't have a budget otherwise, that seems like a really low number to me, right? Like they spent, what was it, $9 million on the Super Bowl ad. They spent however much to actually create the ad, right? Like if that's the entire budget for this team, that feels out of balance to me.
Yeah.
Given that they have over $1 billion in cash on hand, like if we're going to invest in anything right now, it should be securing the platform, making sure that all of the listings that are there, right? Like let's just nudge that to 75, give them a 50% raise in their budget, right? Nudge it to 75 million. You're not even going to hear it. So that stuck out to me. I'm curious if anybody has a better number than that, like if they've seen the actual way that Etsy breaks down their budget. But I saw that number, and when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay. And then I went to the Q1 report and looked at their cash on hand. I was like, they have over $1 billion in cash on hand. And if that's the amount they're investing in this, we have a little bit of a mismatch.
Yeah.
And that's what took me down the rabbit hole. The very first thing that they really started to dig into when they got into the meat of the report, for lack of a better term, is that they took down 3.8 million listings last year for policy violations. Now, this is going to be handmade policy, image policy, all of those kinds of things. And basically, they doubled the number of listings that they removed for policy violations from 2022. Now, before we dive into how this happens, what this process looks like, does that number seem really big or really small to you?
To me, it seems really big. And for policy violations, like what are we talking about? Like, what is the policy violation? Is there anything in the report, Chris, that actually gives us some insight as far as like a policy violation could be a slew of things?
Well, so basically what they're talking about here with this 3.8 million is their house rules. So this is going to be a violation of something that could potentially be on the marketplace, right? It's not copyright infringement. That's a whole different section of the report, and we'll get there. This is just listing creation violations. So you didn't market as handmade with a production partner. You have an image that is inappropriate. It's not quite right for the marketplace, right? It's not an actually handmade product. And given that they have 2,400 employees, right? Even if everybody was looking at these listings, they wouldn't necessarily be able to come up with that number, right? And this is where they really started to use AI. Inside of their report, they're saying 94% of those, so 3.5 million of those listings, were flagged by their system. Only 6% of those, like 300,000 of those listings, were flagged by somebody on Etsy. So a seller reporting it as a violation. Somebody saying, hey, this is not a handmade product, right? Only 300,000 of those, 6%, were flagged by the community. The other 94% were flagged by their automated systems, right? So their in-house AI that they use to start to track these listings down. When we dig into it a little bit further, they said almost the vast majority of these were handmade policy violations. And 4 times more listings this year were removed for handmade policy violations than they were last year. And 2 times as many sellers this year were suspended. They didn't give the full number of shops suspended, but they said they suspended shops for double the number of people this year for handmade policy violations. Now, everybody has had the impression for a while that this is a 100% like automatic thing. And what this report lets us know, which is, I'm not sure if it's better or worse, and I'm gonna get your take on this here in a second, is that of all of those listings, those 3.8 million listings, they are flagged either by somebody in the community, right? Really small number of people reporting things, or by their AI. And then someone looks at them and decides if it's a handmade policy violation or not. So just thinking about that number of 3.8 million, does this seem like something that somebody would be able to take a look at scale and make a rational decision about?
I don't know how it could, right? Like 3.8 million, if you were to do the math, and like how many, like we would have to know how many people are on this team, right? And I know you did a rough number. You're like, I think you went with like 100 people. Like, let's say we have 100 people. Like, what would that number be? Like, how many listings would someone have to look at, if they were assigned these? What was the number?
So Etsy has, as of their last update after the layoffs and all of that, 2,420 employees across the entire organization.
Now, how many? 2,400?
2,400.
Okay.
This isn't to say that maybe they're not using a contractor, right? Maybe these aren't employees, but if we assume there are 100 people looking at this, which would be a big percentage of their overall employee base, if they have actual employees and not contractors looking at this, they would have to look at a listing every 4.6 minutes for 8 hours a day, 365 days a year, no pee, no poop, no lunch break, no cigarettes, nothing, sitting at their desk, reviewing a listing every 4.6 minutes.
Yeah.
Do we think, right? Like, and even if we take that to 200, they have 8 minutes to look at it. Right. Let's call it 9 just to round up. That's still not a rational thing, because you're going to have a little bit of time for lunch. You're going to stand up to go to the bathroom, right? So maybe, let's say it's 200 people. They're going to have 5 to 6 minutes when you start to factor those things.
Yeah.
Do you think you can look at a listing, analyze the photos, pull up the entire handmade policy and say yes or no? In some cases, yeah. In some cases, heck no. It's going to take more than 5 minutes to look at the listing and understand if it is violating a policy. And I think one of the things, at least for me, where this started to make sense is and we've heard this a lot in the comments, people are saying, hey, my shop got suspended. I submitted an appeal, and what happened? I got a reply within 2 minutes saying, we've thoroughly reviewed your appeal and we've rejected it. It's literally impossible to do that. And what appears to be part of the problem with this is what they are measuring. And so in their report, one of the things that they call out as a really great thing to investors is that they're reviewing all listings within 48 hours. So basically what happens is something gets flagged either by the AI or a human. It is then removed from search results. It's still active inside of your Etsy seller account, but they then have to review it within 48 hours. And they're saying most listings are reviewed within that 24 to 48 hour period. So within a day. If they decide it's a policy violation, it gets taken down. If they decide it's not, then they go from there. The other thing that's interesting is if we look at this number, this is the number of listings that were taken down.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the number of listings that were flagged or reported.
True.
Right?
True.
So that 4.5 or 5 minutes is based on the number of listings that were taken down, not the number of listings that were reported. So they actually have substantially less time to look at it. And it makes sense if you're measuring this on time to completion, right? How long does it take my team of customer or, seller support people to review these listings, and not on whether or not they're reviewing them accurately? Of course, you're going to have all kinds of people getting listings taken down for no reason or flagged for no reason. And when you start to feel overwhelmed, and Scott, I don't know if you've ever cut a corner in your life, but a lot of people, you have a million different things to do today, right? You have 50 emails to get back to. Maybe you answer like 48 of them, just delete 2 of them because they're kind of jerks and you don't feel like dealing with them, right? In this case, maybe they can't delete it, but they can certainly click definitely a policy violation as fast as they want to. And there doesn't appear to be a review on top of that. So if you look at your first 10 of your 100 for today, and all 10 of those were flagged by the AI, and you say, hey, all 10 of these were definitely policy violations. You start to fall into that groove where you're like, kind of looks like one, kind of looks like one, kind of looks like one. Maybe I'll spend a minute looking at this one because it's a fun looking product. Nah, policy violation, policy violation.
Let me ask the audience, anyone that's watching this, whether it's live or on the replay, have you been suspended for a listing in the past? So let us know in the comments if you have in fact had a listing that was suspended, that was flagged. And then the second part of that question would be, if it was flagged, did it get taken down? And was it just a generic template that everyone else is receiving? I'm just curious if you would drop that in the comments and let us know. That would be helpful for all of us to kind of see where we're at. I will say right now, and I'm going to knock on some wood here, we've been very fortunate, and I will say lucky, because I think we had one. It might have been flagged, but then it was immediately, we didn't even have to respond to it. It was immediately reinstated. So I don't know if something happened and then they course corrected. I don't know.
Do you remember what it was flagged for?
I believe it was a violation of, it might have been either it was a handmade, I think it was handmade. Which we know that even though you're doing print on demand, it's still considered handmade. But Chris, why would that get flagged potentially while you're setting up your listing? There's something that you might have missed, and then the AI comes through, flags it, then it gets put into the queue where someone has to look at it. Like what could have flagged that?
Well, so that is one of the things I think I want everybody to take away from this, right? 4 times as many listings were flagged for handmade policy violations this year as in 2022. We know 3.8 million were taken down. What happened? Well, Scott, you might remember that something happened the end of last year where everybody said, oh my God, everybody's listings are being taken down. The AI has gone crazy. You can't have mock-ups. You can't do anything. It was the mock-apocalypse, right? The mock-up apocalypse that happened because they had a flagging system that went a little bit rogue, but based on one of their principles, which is selling print-on-demand products is perfectly fine. Using mock-ups is perfectly fine as long as you correctly set up your listing. And it turns out a lot of people are setting up their print-on-demand listings and not listing their production partner, not setting it up as what Etsy refers to as handmade with production assistance. When you set up a print-on-demand listing, you are not the person who is producing the product. You designed it, but you're not creating the product. And if you don't list that on your listing, and what seems to have happened at the end of last year is a bunch of people had mock-ups. They weren't listing it as handmade with a production partner. And Etsy went through, they saw that same image on everything, and they took a bunch of people down. It didn't have anything to do with the mock-up. It had a lot more to do with how the listing itself was set up. So if you're selling print on demand, make sure that you are listing that production partner, that you are saying that that is who is creating it, and that you are the designer of the product. And that will help you with a big portion of these takedowns.
Let's slow that down and do that one more time, because I want people to understand that, like, that one little thing could prevent you from getting flagged if you do this properly. So in the production partner, would that be someone like Printify, Chris?
Yes. So whoever's actually producing the product would be your production partner.
Okay.
When you go into your listing creation screen, I forget exactly what the terminology is, but it's basically who made this product, who makes this product. And you can say, I did, you can say someone on my team, or you can say someone else. And you should be selecting someone else for who makes the product. Because what Etsy means when they say makes the product, they mean physically produces the product.
Right.
And unless you also happen to be the person that sells on Printify the blank t-shirts that you are then printing on,
right,
you didn't make it, you created the design. And there's actually a separate section in the listing creation screen to say, I designed it, someone else is printing it. And then when you set it up that way, before you publish your listing, you will see in the back end, it says handmade with production assistance. If you just see handmade and you're selling a print on demand product, you set up your listing incorrectly. And actually, Printify has some great instructions that show you exactly how to do this, but there's a lot of bad information saying, oh, no, you designed the product, so you made the product. That's not how Etsy is using the word made, right? They're saying who produced it, who physically printed the t-shirt, who created the pillow. You created the design, someone else created the product.
Yep. I want to put Sarah's response up here, or her comment. Yes, I've had several listings flagged for copyright infringement, which they weren't. And then Etsy reinstated my items later, only to do it again and then permanently suspend my shop. I have appealed. Wow. So keep us up to date on that. And if you guys have not went to our video where we are, well, we're trying to get attention. I think we're at 18,000 views on that video right now and over 500-600 comments. We're really trying to do that to try to get that video more exposure. So someone on Etsy's team, the CEO, obviously Josh Silverman, but we're hoping that someone sees it. If you guys have not yet commented on that video, we will link that up in the description, and make sure that you go there after this and then make sure that you comment, you like that video, because that'll just help that video continue to get reach in the YouTube algorithm. And we need that, because that there is a call out, and there's a lot of stories in those comments that are saying exactly this right here. And they've gotten suspended. I have appealed, and now I can't even talk to anybody. Like, no one will even talk to me, which we need to get that cleaned up. So if that's happened to you also, drop that in the comments and let us know.
This issue specifically is something we'll dive into here in a minute, and it gives me even more pause for the handmade policy violations. When we start to understand what's happening on the copyright and trademark side, I'm curious if those numbers in any way are reflective of what's happening on the policy violation side, your image policy, handmade policy, any of those kinds of things. And I think the easy thing to do here, Scott, is to gripe about this and say, oh my God, right? Like 3.8, Etsy's just taking everybody down. You get a suspension. You get a suspension. Everybody gets a suspension.
Wait a minute, Chris, do that again. I got to put you up full screen for that.
I can't rechannel Oprah. I don't know that happens. It either comes down
or you get a
suspension. You get a suspension. Everybody gets a suspension. Now I need to do Tom Cruise and jump up on the chair behind me. But I think, there's a difference between pointing this out and saying, look, like, there's not an easy solution to this problem from Etsy's side, right? Even if they double the number of people that are manually reviewing this, you're not making their job necessarily easier, because you're going to have more sellers. You're going to have more things. So we can sit here and talk about this, but is there a way to solve this problem? Not really. Like, no platform has worked this out. The only thing we as sellers can do is understand where Etsy is looking, where things are being cracked down on, and make sure that we don't fall victim to somebody mistyping a line of code that says, if they have this image, automatically suspend their shop, or any of those kinds of things, right? We need to set ourselves up for success as much as we can, which means making sure our listings follow the policy to a T. Does it mean we won't ever have a listing suspended? No, but since they are using a flagging system to do this, it means we're setting off less alarms or fewer alarms.
Yeah.
Right. If we're using the same image as everybody else, and if you think about this logically for a second, if we're using the same mockup as 100 other people, do you think Etsy knows that that's a print on demand product? Yeah, probably. Right. And so if we're all using the same mockup and your listing is set up as handmade with production partner, mine isn't, they go, oh, a handmade policy violation or an image policy violation. It's one of the two. So we're just going to smack them with it. And one of the things, Scott, from a nerdy perspective that stood out to me that was interesting is they started talking about the precision of their AI. And I know this is a little bit nerdy unless you've taken a college class on stats, but there's a difference between accuracy and precision, right? Accuracy means you're on target. So if you're shooting arrows at a bullseye or throwing darts, right? You're hitting the bullseye.
Yeah.
That's accuracy. So one dart, you hit the bullseye. That's an accurate throw. You throw 2 darts, you hit the bullseye both times. That's accurate and precise. You're hitting the target and you're doing it consistently. But you can be precise without being accurate. So you can hit the upper left-hand corner 5 throws in a row. That's really precise, but it's not accurate. It's not on target, right? So what they're talking about is how precise their AI is. And they use the word over and over again. And because this is reviewed by people who are buying stock, they're typically very, for lack of a better word, precise with the words that they use, right? They're very meticulous, very careful with the words that they use. So they're not saying that the AI is accurate. They're saying that they're really good at identifying patterns. They then do the human review on top of that to try to ensure accuracy. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. What we have to, as sellers, be doing is trying to figure out how to avoid getting caught in one of those patterns. Right? So if we're creating print-on-demand listings, let's make sure we're doing it. If we can take our own photos, let's make sure we're taking our own photos. If you have to use a mock-up, make sure it accurately represents the product. Make sure we're not doing any of the IP infringement stuff that we'll get to here in a minute, right? Let's keep it as clean as possible. We can't eliminate the fact that we might get caught up erroneously in one of these things, but we can reduce that possibility. And the fewer flags that we throw out, the fewer alarms we set off, the less likely we are to be caught up either with a single listing or the shop as a whole. And like I said a little bit ago, they doubled the number of sellers that were removed for violating their house rules, which would be something like the handmade policy. They took down 4 times as many listings and they doubled the number of sellers. And a lot of that happened, when was that? September, October? Right before Q4 when they had the mock-up apocalypse.
Question for the audience. Right now, I'm just curious. We're talking all about the platform, Etsy, which is amazing, by the way. Like, I don't want to play down the opportunity that we all have to sell on this platform, just like Amazon. It's a platform. And what people need to understand is it is a shortcut for e-com sellers. And what I mean by that is, I've never looked at Etsy as we're only going to focus on Etsy and I'm going to build an Etsy business. That's not, I've never looked at it that way. And that is because I've built several businesses in the past and I've never done that because it's very risky. So I look at it as it's an opportunity to hop in on this platform, get in front of buyers, people that are searching for stuff, use their checkout system, use their marketing internal email triggers and couponing and all of the stuff that you would have to learn up front. You get access to all of that. Do you pay? Yeah, you're going to pay a fee for that and they're going to make money with that, but you're getting exposed to their customers. They're their customers. They're coming to Etsy because they've brought them there, not necessarily you. So my question is, and a lot of people are all like up in arms, like, oh my gosh, like, that's why I hate Etsy and all this stuff. But we have to also understand, like, they're trying to make it a better platform. Now, are they overreacting? Is the AI going nuts? Yeah, they got to tame that thing, right? They got to slow that thing down. But I'm just curious, are you focusing on just Etsy? Is that all that you're focusing on? And what I mean by that is, are you thinking bigger? Are you thinking about you're building an e-commerce business? And that's why we always talk about, we're never jumping on like, oh, this product is selling really good on Etsy, so we're going to just sell that. We don't care what niche it's in. We're just going to sell that. Oh, here's another one. We're going to sell that. Because outside of Etsy, it doesn't mean a thing. So what we're always looking at is like, is there a niche that's selling well on Etsy that could also sell off of Etsy? So I'm just curious. Have you had that thought? And are you building an e-commerce business or are you just building an Etsy business? Curious. Drop it in the comments. All right, Chris, where do we want to go next? We've got more to dig in here on that report. I know we've just scratched the surface.
let's get into the IP side of things here. I think we can all agree that Etsy has a little bit of an intellectual property problem, and so it's interesting, Scott, that the same team that's responsible for the handmade policy and all those kinds of things is the team that is responsible for the intellectual property side of this. So copyright, trademarks, all of those kinds of things, and they took down, what was that number, Scott? 3.8 million listings for handmade policy violations. And they are saying that last year they took down 1.2 for IP violations. Now, I don't know about you, but that seems kind of reverse based on what we see on Etsy on a daily basis. Now, taking down something for intellectual property is a much more complex problem because it's not Etsy's rules. They're enforcing someone else's rules in this case, right? So you have to have certain things for that to happen versus a listing getting flagged by a human or the AI and them going, well, it's clearly not marked as print on demand, so we can just take that down. This is a little bit of a stickier situation. They said they had 122,000, almost 123,000 reports that led to 1.2 million listings being taken down. I think they said 1% of those were for patents. Pretty much everything else was either a copyright violation or a trademark violation. Somebody selling something that they don't have the rights to sell.
Well, Chris, I'm going to jump in here real quick because I know there's, and someone even posted it in the comments, and I'm going to try to find it. It was right here and basically said it's very easy to get stores banned by competitors, and this is another problem. Do you see this as potentially like are those complaints coming from our competitors? Is this coming from someone that's like, you know what, I'm going to send in a violation on them so that way they get removed? Because I think in the report, I think it was in the report, you had said that they're basically just not even looking. They're just kind of doing, right? They're just like, oh, another one's flagged. Yeah, Sam, go ahead, shut that thing down, right? There's no look. So is it that easy to basically just go, oh, I'm going to go ahead and have a complaint because they're violating my design or they're violating something that could be, a trademarked item or something? Like, what's your thoughts on that? And is there anything in the report on that? And Chris has froze on us. So I think he's thinking. Right now. I think he might be back. He was really in deep thought. There he is.
It depends on what we think that people are maliciously doing, right? If we think they're maliciously reporting handmade violations, probably not, because that was 6% of all of the reports that they got, or all of the flagged listings that they looked at, came from the community. That changes a little bit when we talk about IP. And there were some problems that I see with the IP violations. Now, what they are saying is 70,000, so a little over half of their 123,000 were reported through the report portal. So basically, somebody like a Disney, Universal Music, we know, had a big crackdown. They came after all the Taylor Swift stuff, right? Luke Combs got in some hot water because his legal firm went after somebody selling a tumbler. We had a bunch of these big celebrity cases. They would get reported through the portal. The other ones got flagged by the AI, right? And they do a lot of counterfeit flagging from the AI, all of those kinds of things. But if what we're thinking is people are just reporting stuff and that will immediately get your shop shut down, it's actually not the case. And if we look at the numbers that Etsy is giving us from the report themselves, right, they had those 123,000 reports. 26 of those were dismissed by Etsy. They said, either you didn't give us the information, you didn't give us a trademark, right? And that's why I said this is a little bit more complex, because before they can act on something, they have to verify that you have all of the information. So you can go in and make a report, but unless you actually prove that you own the rights to that, they reject it. And they seem to be doing a pretty good job of that, right? If they're rejecting a quarter of those, that's a pretty good sign that the junky ones, the ones that are not accurate, are being taken care of. Now, the other thing that was interesting here was, of the other ones, only 12%. So I don't know how familiar you are with the copyright process, but let's just say, Scott, we're live on YouTube right now. We get a copyright strike on YouTube, right? Okay. Etsy comes in and says, this report's protected information, even though it's public information. It's our copyright, even though we're not using their report. We're just sharing that, right? They can come in and do that, and anybody can make a copyright claim. we can then challenge that. So if YouTube, for whatever reason, decides that it passes their muster, Etsy decides that it passes their muster as the person being claimed against, we can challenge that claim. We file what's called a counterclaim notice. Of the reports that were passed through by Etsy, so they weren't rejected, only 12% of those reports were challenged by sellers, right? So what that tells me is if you, Scott, got a copyright violation inside of your Etsy account, and they gave you the button, which is what they do, to say, hey, I want to appeal this, or I want to challenge this, or I want to file a counterclaim. Would you not file a counterclaim if you actually owned the rights to that? Like,
right.
Everybody would. And so what this tells me is the vast majority of those reports are accurate, at least to some extent, or people don't care enough to go in and do that, right? If you actually created the design, you're going to go in and do that because it's your livelihood. It's something you care about, right? One of the YouTube channels that I'm an admin in got a copyright strike the other day for a video that was a clip of a movie that they created.
Yep.
Right. Obviously, immediately went and said, we literally created this movie. Somebody else has the rights on streaming services to show it, but it's our movie. And YouTube was like, oh yeah, okay, fine. Right. If you file that counterclaim, then to take your listings down and to keep you off the platform, they have to sue you and take you to court. Right. So if you're filing that counterclaim, it means you truly believe that you have the right to sell that product. The vast majority of people who are getting copyright or trademark violations aren't doing that because they're selling Disney stuff and they know that they shouldn't. Or they used the Etsy API to bulk upload a bunch of infringing products and they just said, they got that store shut down. Who cares? We have another 5.
So Chris, so I know the question that a lot of people are going to be asking, because I've asked myself this question and so have you really. Why can't they create something in their AI or, just in their automation that says, if you put Disney in the title, it's going to get held until you prove that you have the license to sell Disney. But what I'm hearing is you can put it up. Etsy, they're okay with it. But if Disney contacts them and says, you need to look at that, that's our license, then they can take it down. But I can list stuff freely. Like it's fine to do. I can do it. There's nothing that Etsy says that they're putting in place that's going to filter that out. Now I know on Amazon you can't. You the minute you put something in your title, it'll give you a flag. It'll say, nope, ain't putting that in there. So why aren't they able to do that? Or are they? And is that part of the listings that are getting flagged?
So they have a system apparently, and I may have misinterpreted this, but I read it 4 times for counterfeit goods. And it looks like in addition to the trademark, copyright, patent infringement stuff, which is what we're talking about here, the 1.2 million, they took down another 1.45 million. So almost 1.5 million listings for counterfeit. And they seem to be flagged by the AI. Now, the reason, and again, I'm putting words in Etsy's mouth here. Somebody like an Amazon, you typically are not selling used things or you're not selling handmade things as much on Amazon. I understand that Amazon handmade is a thing, but it's not arts and crafts like you get on Etsy. It is almost exclusively print on demand. And if you think about something like eBay, Scott, do you remember the concept of the first sale doctrine? So you could buy a Disney cup at Walmart and then wait 10 years until it was a collector's item and turn around and sell it on eBay. That doesn't infringe on Disney's trademark or copyright because you purchased it and you have the right to do with it what you want, right? Etsy falls into a weird gray area between like purely that and what you have on Amazon, which is basically created products or print on demand exclusively products, right? You could buy, theoretically, a bolt of fabric with Disney princesses on it and make pillows and sell those on Etsy. That's not a violation of Disney's copyright or trademark. So they are in a little bit of a stickier situation than the other platforms are, where like Amazon, it's black, eBay is white, Etsy's in that weird gray space in the middle where they're saying, hey, we have to kind of err on the side of the seller here unless somebody reports it. The other thing is they can't proactively take things down in a lot of cases unless somebody has reported it. And Jessica actually in the comments just said, I thought the IP holder had to report infringement on trademarked items. And that's why Etsy has their reporting portal. But also you could proactively work with some of these bigger people like Disney to say, hey, let us use your trademark database API, because you have to know that Disney knows who has the rights to sell their stuff and who doesn't,
Mhm.
right? They have an Excel spreadsheet somewhere at that giant mouse run organization that says, hey, Scott can sell Disney stuff, Chris can't, right? To let us hook into that and do that. But is that the best use of their development resources? Maybe, maybe not. And so they are reliant on people reporting those through the Etsy trademark portal. And when they do, if they give them all of the information that they need, it seems like a lot of those people are getting taken down, right? We said 123,000 reports, 1.2 million listings were taken down last year. That's kind of a drop in the bucket compared to the handmade policy violations. But that a lot of that comes out of the extra hoops that they have to jump through to be able to do an IP takedown, because it's not their rules. They have to follow a very specific process. They have to verify the information. And if they don't get everything that they need, or somebody challenges it on the back end, then they're kind of out of the loop on it, right? Again, just like the enforcing their own policy thing, I don't know of a platform that's solved this 100%.
Yeah.
Amazon has done a much better job over the last few years. And I think using that model to say, hey, if you're putting Aladdin in your thing, even if it's just check here if you're sure you're allowed to sell this, and if we suspend this listing because we get an IP takedown, it'll cost you your account, right? Like, give me a checkbox like that, and it'll speed this entire process up. So, Scott, we were talking about the way to get around some of the handmade policy violations, right? Not get around them, but help ensure that we're not getting taken down here.
Sure.
What is the easy, no nonsense advice to avoid the IP violations?
Well, obviously, you don't want to sell stuff that you know is trademarked or that's copyrighted or that is owned by a company like Disney. Like the obvious, a TV series that's blowing up like Yellowstone was, like, basically common sense. Taylor Swift, who's been known to go after sellers. Or you can, go after, or you can sell Luke Combs stuff and, he'll say it's okay. You can sell his stuff. Remember that, Chris?
Or give you a nice chunk of change, right? That's an interesting story. And from a human being perspective, I like what he did. From a seller perspective and from a fan perspective, I'm like, two very different opinions in my mind there, right?
Has anybody heard
the story?
Has anybody in the comments let us know, have you guys heard the Luke Combs situation where a lady was selling his stuff, and then his lawyers reached out and we're going to file a lawsuit against her, and we're going to make her pay like $250,000, and it was awarded that she was going to have to pay this, and then he had no idea this was going on. I'm just curious if anybody else has heard the story. But long story short, if you haven't, he actually reached out to this lady and said, I apologize. I never would have sued you for this. By all means, you can sell my stuff. I don't care. I don't need anything from it. And actually, I'm going to give you, I think he gave her like some free tickets or backstage pass or something like that, right? So he actually
rewarded her. And then he put her
her
Tumblr on his merch site.
Yeah. And so, as that is very nice. Thank you, Luke Combs. We really appreciate you doing that. The problem is Taylor Swift doesn't have the same mindset as you. And so the problem with that is you're going to think that you can do it for every country artist. You can do it with any, and then all of a sudden you're going to have this person in that organization that's not like Luke Combs that is going to sue you for $250,000, or you're going to be, tied up in legal fees and all of that stuff. So just the thing is, Chris, and you asked the question, just don't sell stuff that is obviously trademarked. It's that simple.
I think that's the obvious. That's the obvious answer, right? And Scott, you and I shared an article back and forth this morning. I think the Spice Girls are getting back together to write a new version of Wannabe, talking all about, if you want to sell my stuff, you got to get my licensing, right? David Beckham is coming after some sellers who are reselling his things without permission. And it's like, what is the easy answer to that? Don't sell licensed things. Right. Some of the things you can do with licensed things, you're allowed to resell. Some of the things you can do with them aren't. So if you didn't create it, probably don't sell it on Etsy, and you can avoid that problem. Not everybody is as nice as Luke Combs is, right? And there's a reason that they go after these things. You might say, well, Disney's got enough money. Why do they go after sellers? Well, if they don't enforce their copyrights, they don't enforce their trademarks, they lose them. And Scott, you might remember, do you remember when Kleenex sued a bunch of people back in the early 2000s, and Velcro did the same thing?
I remember the Velcro one. Yeah.
I remember at work, we had to start calling it hook and loop fastener, which is the official name for what Velcro is, because one side is hooks and the other side is loops, and the hooks catch the loops, and that's what makes it sticky, right? Well, the reason they started suing people is because they were both brand names. Kleenexes are facial tissues, right? Velcro is hook and loop fastener. That's the generic word for the product or the product category. And what had happened was they weren't going after people, and they were at risk of losing the trademark of Kleenex and Velcro, right? Xerox did the same thing, right? It was a copy, a photo copy, but everybody just started using Xerox, and it came into the vernacular, and they were at risk of losing the trademark. And so if they don't go after people, even if they're only making $1,000 a month selling on Etsy or whatever, then they can start to run into issues. And so the easy solution here is just don't sell stuff you didn't create, right? Somebody in the comments said, hey, you said something about licensed fabric, and some of the bolts that I have say that I can't resell things. Okay, right? But the moral of the story is you can create products with a lot of those things and resell them. You can create a decoupage of copyrighted things and resell that because it's an original work, right? But if you want to avoid this, you want to avoid anybody coming after you, create your own stuff. It's really easy to do, especially now with, and I'm going to say the trigger word, Scott, AI. Even if you're not a designer, right, you can create some really cool looking things. Just put the time, energy, and effort into creating your own stuff. Is there anything else on the IP side of this, Scott, that you wanted to address really quick?
No, I think we've kind of covered it. I would like to know, though, just for fun, because Brooke said here, Taylor got the shaft from a record company, so that's why her team goes after trademark items. Maybe some would argue she's got plenty of money. What the heck is she doing? Why does she even do that? I just think it's the point that you're not supposed to just go and make money off someone else's name. And I'm not against what that she is doing that. And I think Luke Combs, that's great, but I think it's also misleading because I'd say probably he's the 1%. I think everyone else that's in business and has created a name is not going to let you sell merch on their behalf for and not give them a kick or not license it. So I'm just curious, do you guys think Taylor should be going after people, or do you just think like she should just let it go? She's got enough money. I mean, gosh, I think her last tour did like $1 billion.
Only $1 billion? That's like how much cash on hand Etsy has right now.
So let us know in the comments.
You heard it here first. Taylor Swift bigger than Etsy. That's what we just learned today.
We did. Oh gosh, I believe that actually. But who here thinks that Taylor should just chill out and she should just let people sell her stuff? I'm just curious.
Well, again, based on the comments, Scott, and I know you did a video, a reaction video a while back, reacting to a seller who got taken down for exactly that, copyright and trademark violations. And one of the most common comments we get on that video is, how can Taylor Swift copyright or trademark this? She's violating Bananarama's copyright or trademark, right? I forget what the song is or what the lyric was, but they're like, that's a Bananarama song, right? Regardless, it's like super secret double copyrighted then, right? But if they don't go after these things, they lose the rights to them. And one of the worst things for an artist, ask Prince, is to lose the rights to your own image, right? Yeah. Scott, do you remember when Prince changed his name to a symbol?
Yeah, I vaguely do.
And the media started calling him the artist formerly known as Prince.
Yes.
And everybody that didn't know why was like, he's the weirdest person on the planet. The reason he did that is he actually signed the rights to his name away in one of the record agreements that he had.
That's crazy.
And so he lost the rights to his name and likeness. If you are somebody who is a celebrity and you're not going after people violating your image or your protected works, you can lose the rights to those things. Yeah. Not in the same way that the artist formerly known as Prince, because he got him back and started calling himself Prince again. But you still lose the ability to monetize that. And they say, oh, well, Taylor Swift has billions of dollars, but that can all go away if you stop going after it. And it's not because you're greedy necessarily. It's because you need to protect what you've built. And for people just to go out and do that and sell that stuff, do you really think Taylor Swift cares about the 5 t-shirts that you sold this week on Etsy? No. What she cares about is the snowball that can happen if you don't go after those.
For sure.
And you could say, just take it down. I don't want to pursue the financial penalties. But then you also have the other side of that, which is, well, if nobody gets slapped with anything, and this is, I think, where your rub was with the Luke Combs thing. If nobody gets slapped with anything, then what's to stop everybody? Hey, Luke,
what
I need
example?
a diabetes medication.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start selling your stuff. And hopefully your lawyer accidentally slaps me down. And then you give me a couple $100,000 and some concert tickets. Luke Combs, if you want to give me concert tickets, huge fan.
It's just an example
Teaching my
being
fiance
set.
Spanish through country music, right? We'll come on out, right? Love you as an artist. Not a huge fan of that decision from a legal and business standpoint, but did the right thing, right?
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's move on. Before we do, though, I'm just curious. We might have struck a chord here. We got any Swifties in the house? We got any Swifties? I've got one in my house. I mean, we're talking hardcore Swifty, like real Swifty, like not like the kind of like I'm a Swifty. No, like she's a Swifty. Like there's a difference. I don't know if Chris, if you knew that, but there's a difference. Do we have any Swifties in the house?
I'm sure we do.
She's a brilliant businesswoman. I'll tell you that. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's move on.
All right. So the next big chunk of this report is kind of in a totally different direction. What this team is responsible for, kind of interesting, Scott. So they're responsible for the house rules, making sure that the policy violations are kept in check. They're responsible for looking at all the IP issues. And they're also responsible for some of the customer service stuff. At least it was included in this report. Yep. I don't know if it's exactly the same team, but they're including this in the report. And I know it was either right before Q4 started or something that they introduced during Q4 was they talked about ramping up buyer protection on the platform. And they relaunched their system for people to be able to open claims, and they ramped up their purchase protection moving into Q4 last year. And so the third thing that I really pulled out of this is what happens when there's an issue with a purchase, right? And what Etsy is saying, and they didn't give us any actual like numbers to look at here, so we have to look at the percentages, unfortunately, was they said 5% of issues, buyers ask for help in one way or another. So out of every 100 orders, 95 of them, you're never going to talk to that person after you give them the tracking information. Cool. 5% of orders, so every 5 out of 100, somebody asks for support in one way or another. And the most common use of that was they were asking sellers for either an additional piece of tracking information or trying to resolve something through the sellers. They said 99.5% of orders had no issues. Half of 1%, so 1 out of every 200 orders, somebody filed a purchase protection request. Now, that's, even though they really ramped this up last year, that's only up 1/10 of 1%. So
this is where Chris is getting nerdy and geeky on us, guys. So just, pay attention.
They did all this stuff in Q4, and we got a lot of comments, Scott, saying, hey, like, they're just promoting this. They're going to go encourage buyers to file these purchase protection requests, and they shouldn't be telling people that this program exists. Didn't really make a difference, right? It went from 0.04 to 0.05, and they sold more stuff, right? So it doesn't really make a difference. The thing that's concerning for sellers here, and I think anybody that's had a purchase protection request filed has probably experience with this, right? So of the orders where these things are filed, they're saying 62% were what Etsy is calling an easy resolution. Scott, do you know what an easy resolution is?
Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah. It's pushing the button to give a refund, basically, right?
Exactly. It's too easy.
Etsy defines an easy resolution. They say the buyer gets their item or a refund with less than 2 contacts. So they emailed once, basically, because less than 2 is 1. So that's the only possible interpretation of that. They emailed or put a ticket in 1 time and in under 5 days, right? So if somebody files a purchase protection request, there's a massive likelihood that they are going to get an easy resolution, which I think we can all agree is just a refund, right? That is more than double. Or sorry, not more than double. It's a 58% increase over what it was in 2022. So they didn't massively ramp up the number of refunds that they are giving, but they did ramp up the number of refunds.
But do they state in there, Chris? Do they state that what the request is for? Because I'm just thinking to myself, like, if someone submits this, so this purchase protection request, is that something that's inside, like when you're a buyer? Like, is it something there that you can just click a button and then go, I want to do this? And then does it ask you the reason?
Yeah, it's the I didn't get my stuff button.
Okay.
Right. So it's them saying I didn't get my order or my order was wrong. right? And
And
there's
then
a
is
few
there a way
different
for
ways.
us is there a way for us as a seller to communicate through that?
Nope.
See,
Etsy
that
handles it.
seems like okay, so I'm just thinking of like PayPal, right? Like PayPal, you can kind of file a thing and then they ask you questions, and then it's going to be like an investigation kind of thing. I mean, not a big one, but it's going to be like, okay, cool, hang tight. And then you as a seller will get that message, and then you have a chance to respond. If you respond, you can also say, you know what? Let me just give you a refund, or you know what? Let me give you a discount, or you know what? Let me send it to you, or let me send you another one. And then, but to me, from what I'm hearing from you, and you and I had a deep discussion last night about it, is they're just making it where you get a complaint, not even a complaint, like you get an issue with an order, and it basically that they say in there, well, I didn't receive it, so immediately they give you a refund. But if they would have just reached out to the seller, we could have said, oh, we got you, like whatever, let me send you another one. Etsy would have made more money because they would have completed the transaction. So to me, like as a stock investor, I'd be like, but that's kind of silly. Why wouldn't you put that other check in place so the seller could at least try to make it right? I don't know. That's just my thoughts. Am I
Well,
wrong in thinking
so
that?
no, you're 100% on. I think PayPal is a great example of this, right? So I file a challenge in PayPal, and I think we would both agree that PayPal almost always sides with the buyer, right? Unless you have 100% proof that it was delivered, right? At PayPal will err on the side of the buyer. But Scott, when is the last time you filed a challenge on PayPal
Oh
for something?
gosh, I can't remember.
Right. It's not an instantaneous process by any stretch of the
No.
imagination. And what Etsy is saying is basically before you file a purchase protection claim, you're supposed to reach out to the seller. 90% of problems are solved by reaching out to the seller.
Wait a minute.
Their stat, not
You're
ours.
supposed to. That's a little check there. That's not really a check, Chris.
Well, so they're saying learn how to start your help request, right? And you go in and you open a case,
Okay.
and you're supposed to contact the seller and do all of those kinds of things. And are they reviewing that communication? Like, hey, Scott, I didn't get my stuff. And you were talking about a negative review that your wife got the other day. They said, hey, my thing never showed up. Can you send me a different color? And you went, you looked, and you responded. You said, looks like it shipped to your front door, right? Giant picture of UPS standing there going, here's your t-shirt, right? Like
Yeah,
the
there
UPS
it
driver
is.
took a selfie with your box in front of your address. What do you want me to do about it? Also, you're asking for a different color, which is kind of weird. More than happy to send you the same one again.
Yeah.
And they can then, after that communication, they can then go in and file a purchase protection request. How long do you think it takes Etsy to look at the communication between the buyer and the seller and resolve that request?
I mean, it shouldn't take that long. I mean, they should have a check in place that it's I mean, I wouldn't say it's immediate, but if they have a human review again within 24 hours.
2 hours.
Really?
So they are resolving those within 2 hours.
Hmm.
And we don't know how many of these there are, but to say that you accurately went it, first of all, 2 hours on average. So if somebody submits that at midnight and they don't start working till 9 a.m. the next morning, that's 9, which means most of these are being resolved within like a minute or two, which tells me that they're either not enforcing really the seller contact, that sellers are not responsive at all, which could be another potential reason, right? Somebody reaches out to you, you don't get back to them, right? If you want to avoid this, that's a way to protect yourself against it. Make sure you're responding to messages, make sure you're sending tracking information, make sure you're checking all of the boxes. But if it gets to a point where it's a purchase protection order, 62% of those are essentially being refunded. Now, in their easy resolution, Scott, they also say, but maybe they got the product in that same amount of time. And as somebody who's run several e-commerce businesses and answered 2 of these emails this morning, hey, where's my stuff? Hasn't showed up yet. Oh, sorry, I didn't check the mail yesterday, right? Is
Right.
it possible that somebody filed purchase protection because they didn't get their thing and got delayed at the post office, and then they get their thing? Yes. Is it likely to happen in the 2-hour window between when somebody files a report and these are processed, again, on average? No, unless the UPS guy is down the block, they're not going to get their thing. And if you already sent it and you've gone back and forth, you sent the tracking information, they're not happy, they file that report, Etsy's giving them a refund, and then they're going to end up with the refund and the product potentially.
Yeah.
Now, again, is this a massive issue? Not really. Half of orders are a
Yeah.
problem, or half of a percent of orders are a problem. But at scale, that starts to add up really quickly. And as a seller, it's something you have to be aware of, right? Are most of these reports legitimate? Probably. Are there some weird people like the lady that yelled at your wife about wanting a different color of a product that are going to try to take advantage of this system? Yeah. Are there people that file fraudulent PayPal reports or fraudulent credit card reports and say, hey, I never bought that thing? Absolutely. But as sellers, we are not in control of that. The only thing we are in control of is what is the listing? What is the communication with the buyer? And are we checking the boxes? And if we're checking the boxes, then it's less likely to be an issue.
Yeah. Here's one that's interesting. I had a customer requested a purchase protection on a $400 purchase because some of the bath bombs crumbled. I totally would have resent the order, would have cost less than $400. Yeah, think about $400 order. How much would Etsy have made on their commission, their list, like fees, all of the stuff, right? Their transaction, like how much would they have made that they lost on just that one order? That, like you said, if they just would have allowed you to handle it or put a check in place before they gave the refund. So I'm curious if you guys have had this happen. I would love to hear what happened and maybe your little story about what happened. So if you guys would do that, that would be cool. So that way there we can kind of see.
Well, so that's interesting because doesn't purchase protection cover only up to 250? So
yeah,
did they give them the entire order back? That would be interesting.
Says that's what happened for me. They ended up with the refund and the product. Yeah. And so that's where you would say, like, okay, could customers start to game the system here? Possibly,
Okay, so I think that's what happened. So Etsy covers up to 250, but then the seller would be responsible for anything above that. If I remember correctly, I'd have to go read through the purchase protection documents, but I think that's what would happen. So not only was Etsy out $250, but then they took, another $150 from, who is it? TARS? I'm butchering that, I'm sure. TYARS. Like we're clawing that money from somewhere, and it's either coming from the seller fee fund or it's coming from the seller themselves.
Yeah.
And again, like there's not a good solution to this problem necessarily other than using a little bit of common sense. And I don't know of any platforms that have worked this out in an intelligent way. Amazon tends to do the same thing, right? They say, hey, your package was held up for 3 weeks at USPS. We'll give you a refund for that. And then if it shows up the next day, you don't have to give them the product back. Like that, that's always felt a little weird to me. But I think if tires, okay. So like TYRES, like tire the city. Okay. If you have tracking information, if they see that it was delivered, should the purchase protection program apply at all? Or should you say work that out with the seller at that point? Or at least look at the communication for longer than a minute and a half to keep you on that 2-hour average. And I think that is the thing that was the biggest surprise to me reading through this report. Not even the 3.8 million listings taken down for handmade policy violations, not the 31,000 stores that were suspended for repeated IP infringements, none of those kinds of things. And that was a number we didn't even talk about, right? 31,635 shops were closed for repeated IP or counterfeit violations last year. It's that it seems like they are measuring the wrong thing. And you and I had a conversation yesterday. I was listening to an interview with Jeff Bezos a few months ago, and he was talking about something that happened at Amazon in the early 2000s. And he was sitting there with the head of the customer service team, and month after month, they were turning in these reports that said, hey, we're answering calls in this amount of time, and we're resolving issues in this amount of time on average. And you may remember this, Scott. Jeff at Amazon.com, you could send, and it was Jeff Bezos's email, right? Didn't actually go to him, went to some weird intern or whatever, but he had a bunch of emails from people saying, hey, it takes me forever to get on the phone with somebody. And what they were measuring was not time to response, it was time to resolution, right? So once they got on the phone with somebody, they could resolve something in 3 minutes. Sure. And that was the number that they were focused on. What they weren't looking at was how long it took to get in contact with somebody, which is more important to the customer. The customer didn't care if they had to wait a day to get the thing resolved, as long as it was resolved. What they cared about was waiting on hold for 4 hours before they got to talk to the person. And so what Jeff Bezos did was, in the meeting, called the customer service line and waited on hold until they got there. And I forget what the number was, but it was like 25 or 30 minutes before the CEO got through to somebody from the conference room line, which you'd think would light up all kinds of things.
Why can't we get our guy, Josh Silverman, to do something like that?
And what appears to be the problem here is that Etsy is doing the same thing. They're measuring the wrong thing. They're not, and they may be measuring something else internally, but this is what they're putting out for the investors. So we have to assume this is the metric that they are basing this on. Yeah. They're basing it on time to resolution, not accurate resolution. We see that with the purchase protection claims, right? How long does it take to resolve a purchase protection claim? 2 hours on average. You're asleep for 8 hours a day. Right? Like, I don't know how many people you have working on that, but that is an insane thing to say. We're looking at the entire back and forth between the buyer and the seller, and we're resolving this in 2 hours on average. And almost every time it's a refund, right? Like, the vast majority of these are a refund. Do we really think that they are looking at these things? And we see the same thing on the policy violation side. And that's why I broke down that number the way that I did, where I was like, if they have 100 people doing this 8 hours a day, 365 days a year, they have 4 minutes to figure out if it violates the policy. And that's if they never go to the bathroom, take a drink of water, want to go outside for a cigarette, do anything else. It feels like we're focused in the wrong area. And that's one of the things I wanted to kind of talk through here. Because like I said, there's not a great solution to any of these things. Right? Nobody has figured out the perfect solution for taking down counterfeit listings. Nobody has figured out the perfect solution to balance seller rights and customer service. Nobody has figured out the right thing in terms of policy enforcement. God, Facebook this morning, Scott, took my Facebook account down and said, we think somebody hacked your stuff because you logged in from a different computer. No, I didn't. I just opened my Facebook on this computer that I use every day, right? So nobody has this stuff worked out. But as sellers, we need to be aware of the things that we can do. And then we need to try to push Etsy in the right direction. Say, maybe we shouldn't be focused on how long it takes to solve the problem. And we should be focused on solving it correctly. And in terms of the handmade listing violations, are they actually violations of the policy? Or are we just clicking the button when the robot tells us that it's a handmade policy violation? When something is an IP violation, are we taking down the entire shop? Are we giving them 15 strikes like we did in the case of some people? Or are we just ignoring it entirely? In the case of purchase protection, is the seller making it up? Or is the buyer making it up? What's the real resolution to this problem? And how quickly can we address the issue to then come back and solve the problem? What is the time to response, not the time to resolution? How quickly can we look at these things and then resolve them correctly? And if we move in the direction of fixing these things the right way, making sure we're getting the accurate answer, not necessarily the precise answer, then it's better for both buyers and sellers.
Well, I think that brings up, again, a little call to action for everyone that's here on with us live, over 275 of you, and everyone that's going to watch this after the fact, which will be thousands. It's really your duty to help voice your concerns. And one way that you can do that is we created a video specifically reaching out to Etsy themselves and Josh Silverman, the CEO. And the way that we are trying to do that is by having you like and comment on that video. If you have not yet done that, it's up over 18,000 views on it right now, and it's growing. I think we posted it about a week ago. I'm going to drop that in the description. Go to that video, like and comment on it. All right. And then that way there, it'll keep that video reaching more people. That's how the algorithm works in YouTube. Okay. And so we would need your help on that. And that's going to help everyone. So we can sit here and talk about this until we're blue in the face about, they're moving in the right direction, and they're doing this, and they're doing that. But until we get someone, like I know Starla Moore has said that she's talking to people on the inside, but she's really not still getting that information that's really that useful. So it's like, how do we get to talk to someone like Josh Silverman? Like, what's it going to take? Right? Like, Josh, we love your platform, but we are frustrated. It's literally like, that's all that we're saying. So guys, if you want to be heard, go in the description after this is over and make sure that you like that video, you comment on that video, watch the video, and put your story in there, put your concerns in there. What do you want to see? And hopefully I'm going to be optimistic, when it is seen by an Etsy executive and they bring it to the board and they say, hey, we got to watch this video by brand creators. Look what they did. They've got all these people saying this. We need to help these people. We need to fix this. That's what we're hoping for. So if you guys could do that, that would be amazing. If you want to stay up to date on all of this stuff, because Chris has got his ear like down and he's listening for all this stuff. A report comes out, boom, he's on it. He's dissecting it. He's messaging me. Subscribe to the channel. Okay. Because this channel is a way for us to connect with you. You'll get alerted. You'll be able to be on these lives and everything like that. And we have a lot of great information that's also useful for building your Etsy shop, but also building your brand, because that's what we're all about. All right. Chris, anything else we need to address here? We've got a lot of people commenting. We even got a super chat today, Chris. Look at that. Look at that.
Yeah,
and there's not even a question attached to it. Christina, thank you so much.
Trademark is law for multiple reasons besides just money. And this is the thing that I think people miss when you see Taylor Swift coming after people, right? She said it protects the artist's images and brand beliefs, i.e. political views, values, or just bad, terrible style, right? But it's your style and nobody else should be able to copy it. And that's the point of trademark. And it can seem like trademark and copyright are overly burdensome. And that's the other comment, Scott, that we get on that video is like, how can you trademark a set of words? Or how can you copyright a set of words? Well, it's the usage of those, right? Yeah. It's not that you own Blue, but you created the song, and I don't know, what is the actual name of that song? I'm Blue, da dee da die. Somebody corrects me in the comments. That weird European techno song from the mid 90s about a blue Smurf in a blue town wearing blue face or something. I don't remember. But it's the usage of those and how those things are used together, right? Mm-hmm. And it's an important thing. If you are an artist, you understand how important this is. If you're looking at this purely from a business standpoint, that's where we start to get some of those comments where like, but it's it's restrictive. Yeah. Like that's kind of the point, right? You can't just take everybody else's stuff and go, okay, well now I'll use this. You need to come up with some of your internal things. And Scott, you pointed out something that I thought was really interesting. You said, our goal here is to basically have that Jeff Bezos in the boardroom moment. We need somebody to take this and say, look, I understand that these metrics look good to investors. They are the wrong metrics, both for buyers and for sellers. And we know, Scott, out of those 3.8 million listings, based on just the rough thing that Starla did, where she took a look at all of the people who said, yeah, I was hit by this. Somebody let me know in the comments what the exact number was, but it was like either half or more than half were legitimate. Yeah. And if we think about this from the IP perspective, right, that's where we got numbers on things that were legitimate or questionable. We saw that 35% of those were either rejected outright by Etsy because they were bogus or they didn't give them the information that they needed, or were appealed by sellers saying this is not a copyright violation, right? If that same number carries over to that 3.8 million listings that were suspended for handmade policy violations, the question that I have is that 65% that made it through that filter because they didn't tell us how many reports there were, just how many listings they took down, or are 35% of those, are 1.3 million of those bogus because they missed the mark? And that is something that we need to be paying attention to, especially if we're looking at this from a buyer perspective and a seller perspective. We're looking at this from a revenue generation perspective, not a really cool numbers to show to investors perspective. We're thinking about the long-term growth of the platform. Every single one of those needs to be accurate, not precise, or at least the vast majority of them. You're always going to have somebody who's having a bad day and just clicking take down, take down, take down, take down, take down. Yeah. We've had that happen with Facebook ads where you're like, I've literally run this ad 700 other times. It's been approved every time. And they're just like, have a nice day, right? Somebody's having a bad day. They don't like the image that you use. They don't like your mock-up. Maybe they hate your political perspective, right? Whatever it is, and they just decide to take it down. But we need to eliminate as much of that as we can from the process. And it comes from looking at this, not from how quickly can we solve this problem, but how can we solve this problem accurately? perspective. And from sellers, the only thing we can do is try to bring that to the attention of the people on the board and make sure we're setting ourselves up as much as we can for success, meaning we're checking all of the right boxes. We're not infringing on people's IP. We're making sure that our listings are set up correctly. If we're doing print on demand, that they're categorized correctly, that the images accurately represent the products, all of those kinds of things. And then we can spend the rest of our day going and trying to get Josh Silverman's attention to say, hey, this is a problem. I understand this is a problem that hasn't been solved well by anybody, but it looks like we're going down the wrong road here. How can we help you turn this around beyond doing the things that we've already done, which is set our shops up correctly, not sell anything that's an IP infringement? How can we make your life easier?
Yeah, Tracy says, I thought they looked at 300 and most of them were violations, lots of creative fabric and designs not being altered, which is probably accurate. And you know what? It doesn't surprise me. So we're sitting here, you know, kind of bashing Etsy and saying like, they're just deleting people and they don't care. And they're, you know, there's no reason they should. But I bet there's a lot of listings that are violating. I mean, you can see it. You can just go there, just type in Disney and you're going to see it. Go in, type in Taylor Swift. They're still there. Like people are still doing it because they're like, I should be able to do that. I should be able to do that. Taylor can't own that saying. That's ridiculous. I'm going to sell it. Right. So if you do go, like, I guarantee, and I'm not going to do this because I don't want to have to go through all of the listings, but if I was to say, submit your listing that was violating terms or your account that got suspended. And if you were to send us those, let's say we received 100, I'm going to probably bet 75% of them are probably going, there's going to be something there once you dig in that there was something.
Title, tags, images, something. Right.
So
here's a question, Scott. What is an acceptable percentage? And this is a number that they didn't give us. Out of those 3.8 million, that was initial takedowns. How many of those were reinstated after an appeal?
Yeah.
Right.
Good point.
And what is an acceptable number? And I'm not going to say, you know, this is not the innocent, guilty prison thing, right? Like I'd rather 10 guilty men go free than one innocent man go to prison, right? How many listings are an acceptable number that were incorrectly taken down? And that should be another metric that they publish and that they are focused on. If I'm running this company and I'm looking at the long-term success of this, what I want to know is, are we doing this accurately and precisely? Are we only taking down listings that do violate our policy? And of the listings that we took down, how many were reinstated? That's a really important percentage, because if it's 5%, we know it's actually substantially higher than that, right? Because we're getting those replies to appeals in like 2 minutes, which means they're not actually looking at it. But if what we are doing over time is looking at whether we're doing this accurately or not, then we can be sure when we take something down that even if a seller raises their hand and says, hey, you know, they just took me down for no reason, I don't know why my 400 Mickey Mouse hats got taken off of Etsy, right? We're sure that it's only those people. We're not only creating a better buyer experience because we're giving them more selection, but we're creating a better seller experience. And when we can create both of those, we can't focus on just one or the other as a platform. We have to focus on the buyer and the seller. That's literally our only job, is to bring buyers to sellers and take a percentage of that transaction. We have to consider both of those groups if we want to grow for the long term. And it seems like the only thing that we're focused on right now is cleaning up the marketplace as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And forsaking the sellers along the way, because we're trying to do this on a time-bound basis, not on an accuracy basis. And you and I talked about this in the past with like the Facebook ads stuff. I guarantee you'd have fewer ads taken down and fewer hours taken up if instead of measuring how long it took for time to case resolution, which is what Facebook used to measure for that, then accurate resolution. Because you and I would have stuff taken down. They go, oh yeah, let's close the case. And then you appeal it. And you appeal it again. And you appeal it again. And you're taking up somebody's time 15 different times. But the only thing that they're measuring is the first one. And instead of measuring accuracy, we're just measuring, was it closed or not? And that appears to be the same road that Etsy is going down right now. And it's a mistake that we don't want to see repeated here for either the buyers or the sellers.
Yeah. Couple things here. Leslie had a strong comment here. Etsy shoppers that lie are costing Etsy a fortune. Why on earth are they so stupid? They would increase their bottom line if they just stopped this nonsense. And I believe she is referring to stupid as being Etsy, because if they would just get this dialed in a little bit, they'd make more money. So yeah, that's a strong comment, but you know, I like it that you believe in what you say. So by all means, I wish they would focus on the blatant violations instead of some of the more nuanced violations. Yeah, I mean, we all would, but they have to start somewhere, I guess.
Well, and this is the other thing that I think is interesting, right? So for a handmade policy violation, right? Like the mock-up apocalypse, what they did was just take the listings down and then send you a thing. And if you had, 3, 5, whatever the number was, listings taken down, they suspended your account.
Yeah.
The smarter way to approach this is the way that like YouTube approaches this. And as much as I hate their approach to violations, they have almost a coherent way of doing this. So Scott, you may or may not know this. The first time you get a strike on YouTube, you can take a test, right? So the first one's like a warning. They give you a warning and they say, hey, this is what you did. Whether you agree with it or not is a different conversation, right? This video violates our terms of service for this reason. Don't do it again. If you do it again, you'll get a strike and we're going to limit you for whatever the amount of time is.
Yeah.
If you get 2 strikes, then we limit you for longer and you can't join the partner program.
Yeah.
You get 3 strikes, we delete your stuff.
I was going to say it's a 1, 2, 3 strike approach.
Yeah. They actually give you 4 because they give you a warning and then they give you strikes and you
but
can
they also tell you, that you violated because the song that you used is trademarked or copywritten, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and that's a copyright violation. That would be different than a strike. But in that case, they say at this point in the video, you violated it. And the argument that we get from Etsy is the same argument that we got from Facebook, maybe because their head of legal used to be the in-house counsel at Facebook, which is, well, we can't possibly tell you what part of the policy you violated. We can't even tell you that it was a handmade policy violation or an image violation, because then people will get around the system. Or you'll have more listings on the platform and you won't have to take down 3.8 million listings and make somebody evaluate one every 4 minutes, because you're saying, hey, this is not being seen on the front end right now because your image is in violation. Fix it. And Amazon actually does a decent job of this, although they take a whole bunch of stuff down, right? And they're like, hey, your thing that doesn't need an expiration date doesn't have an expiration date, so we're going to remove it. But they don't ban that listing from the platform. They remove it until the problem is fixed. And with something like an IP violation, I get maybe not doing that, or something that's clearly drop shipping, right? But if the only mistake that you made was setting up your production partner settings wrong, give me a chance to correct that instead of taking the listing down or banning my entire account because I followed the advice and what appears to be the advice of Etsy, even though it's not when you dig into the entire handbook, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, if you designed it, then you created it. That's not what they actually mean by that. And if you set that up incorrectly, instead of banning the account and delisting all of your items, stop showing it on the front end and let me fix it. And that's actually a metric, Scott, that they measured in this report. I forget what they called it. They called it like VVW or something. I'm going to see in my notes here if I can find it. But it was basically violative listing views. So things that violated, how many people saw listings that violated the handmade policy. And they were down 60% year over year. Awesome. Take it out of search. But send me an email and tell me that there's a problem with the listing and give me a chance to fix it. Now, do we have to have a strike system? Yes. Do they already have a strike system in place? Yeah, on the IP side, right? And we know that because they send warnings to people and then they eventually just take you off. Now, is it as defined as YouTube's? No, but could we set something like that up and make this a better experience for sellers? Yeah. Would it cost us that much money to do? No, but it requires us to focus on the right thing, which is not how many listings did we take down? How quickly did we take them down? But did we take listings down that violated policy? And are we punishing people who repeatedly violate policy? And that's the thing, right? Once is a mistake. 500 times, probably not a mistake. But if they've never told you what the problem is, and you created 500 listings on the same day and you set them all up incorrectly, you should probably get a chance to correct that just from a common sense perspective. By all means, take everything off the front end of the platform, but give sellers a chance to correct their setup mistake or change their primary listing image or whatever the issue is. And then if we see them after, even set up a test. And Scott, I don't know if you've seen this, but after you get your warning on YouTube, at some point they will let you get that warning removed because the strikes fall off. You have to get 3 strikes within a certain period of time. The warning never goes away. Now they've changed that. So you can actually even get rid of the warning by taking a test. And they walk you through their terms of service. And they say, if Josie is sharing her personal medical story. Is that allowed on YouTube? Yes or no? The answer is yes. Josie's telling other people not to get a certain medical procedure. Is that allowed on YouTube? The answer is no, right? They walk you through a bunch of case studies. It would be very easy for Etsy to set up something similar where they're saying, hey, even if it's before the setup process, I understand that if I'm selling this type of product, I need to list it this way. Show me how to do it inside of the platform. It would take you an afternoon to map that out, and you have a whole team of developers that could roll that out very, very quickly. Instead of the silly checklist that they gave us, give us a terms of service checklist and let sellers be aware of the way that they need to set up listings instead of having to come to people like us who are going, dude, you set that up wrong. That's why you got suspended.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw during the mock-up apocalypse, where people are like, I don't know, I'm getting suspended. And you'd go in and you'd look and you say, well, it's not, we know it's not the mock-up. What happened? You're saying that you created this product. You didn't. That combined with the image is what got you flagged and taken down. If Etsy spends a little bit of time setting that up correctly for sellers and letting sellers know what they're doing incorrectly, rather than just removing them from the platform forever, not only do you stop polluting the seller base, but you get more sales because you have more opportunities for customers to find the products that they're looking for. And you create a place where people have opportunity to sell, which drives more people to come to the platform. And you have more to offer, which drives customers coming to the platform.
Chris, I just realized, I think we got to have that little countdown. So when you sound off, we can kind of get you to wind her down, because we're going to commercial break or something. Because Chris gets on a roll, man, and you ain't going to stop him. It's like he's going downhill, and you're trying to pull him back with like one of those bungee strap things. You're like, no, he's gone. He's gone, man. That boy's going downhill. I can't pull him back. So, I mean, I think everyone enjoys it, Chris, but you were running loose there. But you bring up some great points. I did want to give a shout out to some people, new people in the house. I wanted to address this. Why don't you try to pronounce that name, Chris? Cause you're better at that. Is that, Audrius?
Audrius?
FX. Okay, we'll go with that. Yesterday I got my first sale on Etsy after 4 months. It was a pod product and I was very happy. However, a couple hours after that sale, I received a permanent suspension. Any idea, Chris, on what would be going on there? I mean,
yeah.
Wait a minute. I'm going to hold him back. I'm pulling him. Just hold on. You're ready. I know you're chomping. My question is, why did it take you 4 months to get a sale? And that's a separate question. And if it did take you that long, you probably should go in our channel and look at niche research, product research, because you should be making a sale within your first month. But that's for another discussion. We have a lot of training on that. But Chris, go ahead. Why would this happen?
So this is actually really common, and we see this a lot. A lot of times it has to do with banking info. You put in the zip code wrong. You put in the name of the bank. You didn't capitalize it right? You didn't use their integration with what's the stupid company that does the banking integration? No offense to whoever runs that company. I just can never remember your name.
We're never going to get them as a sponsor now.
Yeah, I blew it for all of us. But a lot of times that's what the issue is. And it's not uncommon to get a suspension after your first sale. Usually it's resolved. What I would say is keep an eye out. Etsy is supposed to send you an email to let you know why you were suspended, and then give you a way to respond and appeal that. What I would not do.
This here says permanent suspension. So why would it be permanent suspension? Or is that just their generic one? Because I would have thought it would have said it's under review or whatever, but so you're saying it still could be reinstated.
A lot of times the automatic email that goes out just says you've been permanently suspended or whatever. Mm-hmm. If you've already gone through the appeal process, then it's permanent. What I would say is, like, don't just reply right away to that, and don't just appeal right away to that. You don't want to do what we were just making fun of Etsy for doing, which is resolve it in 2 minutes, right? Because if it doesn't look like you've given any time or attention to the appeal, why would Etsy give any time or attention to the appeal? And so take the time, craft it, for lack of a better word, craft it properly, write out all of your thoughts, and say, hey, I don't know what I did wrong. My products don't violate intellectual property. I didn't violate the handmade policy. My banking information is right. Can you tell me how I violated the policy? And they'll either say immediately no, or in a lot of cases with something like getting suspended after the first sale, they will reverse it, and then you can go from there. But you do have to be careful, and you don't want to just hit reply and go, what the heck, right away. You don't want to do that.
Yeah. It's funny though that why wouldn't they have done that immediately after the shop was created? Was it just because a sale hadn't been through? Like a sale hadn't been processed, so now they have to actually get ready to send the payment? Like, I wonder if there's something in there that you set up your account, it's sitting there idle, and then all of a sudden you get a sale and it's like trigger, like now we got to send money to you and your banking's off or whatever. But I would have thought they would have confirmed that all ahead of time.
Which you think they would, and Lewis Allen just helped me out in the comments and said Plaid. Yes, Plaid is the name of that program. And you'd think if you logged in with Plaid that the banking information would be right because you literally log into your bank account, right? So you should never get suspended for banking info in that case, unless Chase changed your number and didn't tell you or something.
Right.
But who knows?
Oh, right? Okay. So he said it was desk mats and mugs store. Okay, that's fine. But what was on the desk mats? What was on the mug? That's where the problem could lie if it's some type of copyright or something like that. But I wouldn't think it would be. I'm thinking it's more of, like Chris said, the banking information. And I love it that Jolene says Scott goes on a rant now and then also, and Chris just had to wait. Just saying, I'm with you. I love to rant.
I don't think his was quite as long as that one was just now, but that's been on my chest for the last 3 days as I've been looking at this report.
Well, I've said to you, Chris, we have to create a segment of the show that's just a sound off for Chris, and Chris can I can go, Chris, what's really irritating you this week? And then you're just gonna go boom and just let it all out. This is like a therapy session.
Let us know in the comments what a good name for that would be. We can't use grinds my gears, right? That's got to be copyrighted.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things, right? Like a lot of times they don't comply with their own policy where they say, we're going to tell you why you were suspended, and we're just left guessing. And so all we can do is do what we can as sellers to set everything up properly. And then when silly things happen, or we see that they're measuring the wrong thing, scream about it for 5 minutes at a time and see if we can get somebody's attention.
Okay. So here, I was suspended upon opening my store. I appealed, but was not given any reason why, just said they would not discuss further. I know that's so frustrating. Listen, if you guys are just tuning in, make sure that you visit the description. There's going to be a video there that's specifically created for us sellers to get our voices heard from Josh Silverman, the CEO of Etsy, or someone on the board. All you need to do is go to that video, like it and comment, share a story, or just say, we need help or we need support. We need a human to listen to us. Like, put that in the comments over there. We are trying to get the attention. And I mean, I talked to Chris the other day about it. I'm like, I'd like to get this thing's like national news. Like, I would literally, like, you get national news on this, they're going to peek, they're going to look up, go, whoa, what's going on here? So yeah. So, I get it. I mean, it's frustrating. So, what Leslie says here, my shop was suspended several years ago. And even back then, when there were humans, I never got a reason. I like Scott because I feel he doesn't always stick up for Etsy. I don't. I like him, but they got some flaws.
Scott, would you call our approach tough love? Right? If you love somebody, if your kid is screwing up, do you just, and you're watching them go down a bad road, right? They're hanging out with those kids down by the river, right? To quote that old Chris Farley skit.
Yeah.
If you truly love your kid, is it your job just to let them do whatever you want? Or is it your job to say, maybe not a good idea, right? Maybe you don't bring in Chris Farley as a life coach, but you do call them out on it, right? That's what love is. And we love Etsy. We love the opportunity that Etsy gives to sellers, but it doesn't mean that we can't call them out when they're doing stupid stuff. Scott, if I was in a really unhealthy relationship and you knew about it, would you tell me?
Oh,
would you
100%.
Say, dude,
I'd be like, Chris, we got to talk, man.
Your fiance is kind of whack, bro. You would tell me that. And I would trust that you would tell me that. And I'm not going to attack you for it, because you would say, look, if it makes you happy, that's fine. But this is what I'm seeing. And that's how we feel with Etsy. We need to tell it, look, we understand that these are not necessarily imminently solvable problems, right? No. Nobody's worked this out perfectly. But can we take the approaches that seem to have worked, like the strike system, like taking more than 2 minutes to review an appeal, right? Some of these kinds of things, and include them in the system. that, yes, does use AI to give us flags, because even with people reviewing them, it's impossible for them to look at it, which means it's impossible for a human being to do this all at scale. But how do we do these things intelligently? And we need to be having that conversation with Etsy. That's why we jumped on today.
Yeah. I mean, here's a very simple thing. And I think going back to what Jeff Bezos, what he did. And that
Jeff
was
Bot.
he actually wanted to see what the experience was like, but he also is open to listening to sellers and customers. And that's all that we're asking. It's like, if I had a 10-minute coffee date with Josh, and I told him this stuff and just said, here, this is what everyone's saying. All you need to do is just come on and just address it. Let us know that you hear us and that you're working on it and you understand. That's all that we're asking, right? Love the platform. Love the opportunity. Thank you. Same thing with Jeff over at Amazon. Thank you. This is amazing on what you've done. Like, you literally made no money for the first 10 years and now you're crushing it. And you did that for us. Thank you. Right? Like, we're not mad at Etsy. We're a little frustrated, but we're not like mad. It's like, we still appreciate the opportunity.
All I can hear is my mom right now. The worst phrase that a parent can ever say to a child, right? I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Right?
I said that line, by the way.
I'm shocked. It's just one of those things. Like, we're not, well, I am a little mad because, like, some of these things should be self-evident, but really I'm just disappointed that we're not looking at the right things. We're doing what seems to be the right thing unless we dig a little bit below the surface level. And we think about this from the only two perspectives that matter, which are the seller perspective and the buyer perspective. And instead, it seems like what we're trying to do is look at this from the investor perspective. How can we increase the GMS, the gross merchandise sales? How can we massively reduce the number of violative listings? Not, are we doing this in an intelligent and fair and just and accurate way? We're just looking at how quickly can we fix the problem and how many problems did we fix, right? Not did we solve the issue, but did we fix the problem, only to find out that now we have no sellers or we have no buyers because nobody can sell anything unique on the platform, because the first time they make a sale, they get their account suspended because their banking info somehow isn't accurate. Instead of suspending the account, maybe, I don't know, send an email like what happened to our buddy over at Pup Tags, right? Our $7 account balance shut down hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of revenue coming into Etsy because we didn't communicate to them that they had a balance on another account because their card expired or whatever it is, right? If we're using a little bit of common sense, that stuff starts to go a long way.
Yeah, cool. Okay. We're going to wrap this up here. We've been going on for a while Chris has been just on a constant rant. Just playing. I like the rants. I think we got to do more of them. I did want to bring G&M Scout had a question. And so here's what I just want to say before we answer this question. Today wasn't really like a Q&A session, although we'll answer a question or two. I posted something in our Facebook group over at Rock Your Brand. If you guys are not part of the Rock Your Brand community, you might want to go on over and join over there. I think there's just over 5,000 people in that community. But if you'd like to be a part of that, you can go to brandcreators.com/group. And then you will answer a couple of questions. And then as long as you're a human, which you probably are, we'll let you in. You just have to answer a couple of questions. We just do that so that way we're not going to let scammers or people that are just trying to get into the group to sell stuff. So if you want to be part of that, you can. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I put a post in there for questions, and Chris and I are going to dedicate some time to just hopping on and answering questions. And so if you have any questions that you want us to answer on an upcoming video or live, just go into that group. You'll see that one right at the top. And it's really just a post saying like, hey, if you got any questions, drop them in the comments, and we'll be doing a video or two to answer these questions. So if you go to brandcreators.com/group, you can do that. So G&M Scout says, Scott and Chris, they're spelling your name differently. I like that way. Look at that's a cool looking Chris. I like that. Will the sale of one of your listings on Etsy enhance the visibility of your other listings? I like this question a lot. Now, I don't know the answer to this, but I have some thoughts. Listings are typically, they're independent. Okay. And that is the beautiful thing. And Chris is putting "it depends" at the lower third as it scrolls by. He loves playing with you guys. So here's the deal. And the cool thing about it is, if you have a listing, it's going to be its own thing, its own entity. Okay. Now, with that being said, could that help you lift the visibility of your other products? Yes, but not necessarily in organic search. And what I mean by this is, you may think, well, if I get a lot of sales on one listing, it's going to help all my other listings go up in search. No, that's not the way it works. The way it works is, and you have to think about it through Etsy's algorithm on how they would want to set this thing up, because there's only really one thing that Etsy cares about truly, and that is sales, right? So if you have a listing that's getting sales and you have competition and they're selling the same product and they're getting sales, they're going to base it off of the conversion rate, or how many more sales are you getting per how many visits you got. Okay. That's how that's based. They're not going to go, oh, well, this listing got a lot of sales, so this seller must be really good, so we're just going to take all their other listings and put them up there. That's not how it works. Now, with that being said, if you are selling a lot more on this one listing, it is going to increase the amount of reviews that you have on your account. So now when someone is in your shop or on a listing and they see that this seller has 500 reviews versus the competition has 20 reviews, that could help you sell more of your other products. If you sell more of your other products, those products will start to rise in organic search. So that's kind of how you have to be thinking about your listings, as they're independent assets that also could help your shop as far as getting reviews, and that will bump up your conversions on your other products. But the other thing is, if that product is selling very well, there's a good chance people are going to come into your shop. And when they come into your shop, they're going to be exposed to your other products. So ultimately, you would get more views on those other products if it's products that are related to that first product. That's why we always talk about building a product line and building a brand with cohesiveness. All right. So that is my answer on, will that actually help increase the visibility of your listings? Yes, but not necessarily how you might think or that you would want it to.
Yeah.
Make sense, Chris?
Yeah, the answer there is, it's to a really small extent. It has a little bit of an influence on your shop score. It has a little bit of an influence on the way that Etsy looks at the customization, where they're saying we personalize search results for the person. So if they start to understand that phishing people really like your stuff, will they show your phishing stuff to more phishing type customers? Yes, it's not a direct boost the same way that selling more on one listing boosts the visibility of that listing. So, it will help, but not nearly as much as just driving a little bit of traffic to your other listings and starting to get some sales on those, which is why we're such a big fan of Etsy ads. And Scott, that was the other thing I wanted to see if I can pull that comment back up. Somebody had said, hey, Etsy, I started running Etsy ads. Surprise, surprise, my sales went up. And then they told me they were going to put a hold on part of my revenue because I had too many new sales. Yeah, like that can happen. But that's one of the reasons that we like Etsy ads, is because they lead to that boost in sales and they lead to that boost in traffic, which is what Etsy is looking at. Etsy's algorithm is not evil, right? It doesn't hate you. What it's looking for are sales and traffic, and that's it.
Yeah. Let me just pull this one up from Suzanne. My conspiracy theory is that there may be a big old lawsuit that Etsy is burying and hiding. If they admit that they are making a ton of money from counterfeit items, it will be a bleep storm. Chris, that is an interesting theory or conspiracy. Any truth to that? Could you imagine that there could be some truth to that?
You can sue anybody for anything. Etsy does a pretty good job. And we said they took down, I think it was 1.45 million counterfeit listings, in addition to all of the trademark and copyright infringement stuff, right? Their job, their requirement under the law, as far as I'm aware, is to give their best effort, right? So if it is reported by the rights owner, if David Beckham is coming after Etsy and saying, hey, you got to take these sellers down, and they ignore that, that is when they start to have a problem. Allowing it to be sold on the platform in general is not an issue necessarily from a legal standpoint, but it is an issue from a revenue and an investor standpoint, which is one of the reasons. Actually, I think it was around this time last year, Scott. It was like the end of April, early May. You remember there was a big crash in Etsy stock because a bunch of investor reports came out and said, hey, like 80% of their revenue comes from copyrighted stuff, or, whatever it is. It was a ridiculous number. It seemed to be entirely made up out of thin air, but they had a couple days where their stock got really hit by that. You don't necessarily have legal liability there because somebody is breaking your terms of service, which says the seller is the person who's responsible for making sure they're not breaking the law. But if somebody brings it to their attention, David Beckham comes and says, hey, this seller is doing it, then they have to investigate it. And if they just ignore it, that's when they open themselves up to a lot of liability. Again, not a copyright, trademark, IP attorney, but that tends to be how these things go. Everything from a legal perspective is foisted on the seller, and then they fulfill their requirements when they get the reports. It's the same thing with trademark, right? People are like, why don't they go after all of the clearly fraudulent Disney stuff? Because unless Disney tells them about it, they don't know if it's legitimate or not. So they're not responsible for going after it. And if it is leading to some of the revenue, why would they want to go after it unless Disney reports it, right? Like, it was like, oh, Etsy's all about that money. Well, like, yeah. Right? Like,
yeah.
If the person who is the only person who has the legal right to say this isn't something that I approve of isn't telling me that, there's a pretty big incentive to keep selling it. So it's not, I don't think they're worried about some secret lawsuit. Realistically, it just comes down to the profit motive and who's responsible for that. Could they do more on the front end? Probably. And Scott, you pointed out, Amazon has something that analyzes like titles and descriptions. And if you're using Star Wars, they're like, are you really, really sure that this doesn't violate it? And I think if you go listen to that like 10-minute rant that I went on about all of the things that they could do to help sellers out, you'll see a lot of the things in there that they could do, like adding that in and saying, hey, if we find that this is a violation, are you willing to bet your entire account on it, basically? And I think that would actually make their life a lot easier on the back end too, but who knows?
Yeah. So I would like to know in the comments, who also thinks that conspiracy theory could be true? I'm just curious.
Conspiracy fact?
Yeah, fact. Let us know in the comments. I mean, it's interesting. And I know whenever there's something that, you feel, why is this happening? You kind of start to kind of go towards like, is this a conspiracy? Because maybe they're being sued and now they have to be careful. And the way that they can be careful is push the blame off on someone else, us, the sellers. I'm not sure, I mean, it's a theory. I think it's interesting. It's worth talking about, but I'm not quite sure I'm there.
If they were actively being sued, we would know. Right? Like,
True.
Legal proceedings in the US are not a private thing in most cases. And if you were going to sue Etsy, so Universal Music wants to take Etsy down, they're going to make a big stink in the press about how terrible Etsy is on the copyright infringement side of things, right? We went through their stupid portal and they're still selling all this fake Taylor Swift stuff, right? The news media needs to know. Why would they do that? Because that is a juicy, juicy story for the news media, right? So this would not be like a secret, super double secret private thing. This would be a very public thing that is going on, just like what happened with that report that came out at the middle of last year, where people were talking about it, right? They were talking about the potential exposure in terms of the downside of revenue. And like, these are not secret things. Are they worried that they could get sued if they said we could have done more?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe. Like, that's where I can get on board with that a little bit, but also it's not their responsibility technically. They should be doing a better job of it.
Yeah. All right. We had a little update here from Audrius. It was AI generated flowers and nature pictures on desk mats, as well as text-based designs on mugs. So it doesn't sound like that is the issue. It sounds like there's something to do with banking, something set up, verification, something like that. So I would reach back out to them and just be the squeaky wheel, and then report back to us and let us know if you did end up getting a response, because that does not seem like it would warrant being permanently suspended and banned. So yeah, let us know on that. And there was another one here. Okay, there you go. Good. Okay, I agree with Chris. Not necessarily a secret lawsuit, but not chasing IP stuff where the owner isn't pursuing it. Yeah, makes sense. And let's see here. I had one other one that was a question that I wanted to answer before we jumped off. Let's see here. Where was it? Did I mark it as a no, I did not. I wasn't smart enough to do that. It was right at the top here, and then a whole bunch of comments came in. So hang with me here.
Is it this one?
Yeah, that's the one. There it is. I started doing ads at the beginning of May. For a general rule, how many views, clicks should I be looking for you to see if it's working well, or perhaps I have bad products? So we talked about this extensively on this past Wednesday's live stream. First off, before you even get into like what's good demand, or what are my views good, or are my clicks good, you have to ask yourself, what is the expectations that you are looking for? And so I would definitely recommend any of you that are wanting to build out your brand, hit a certain target number money, and really go back and watch that live stream that we did. And it was this past Wednesday. So we'll link that up in the description as well. But the way that I look at this is like, whatever the products are that you're advertising, those are the ones that you want to know what are they possible, or what is the possible number of views, clicks, and sales, right? So really it comes down to sales, and then everything else kind of gets backfilled. So what I mean by that is, if you're looking at your ads data, and your ads data, let's say I'm just using some round numbers here. Let's say you're getting 100 views a day on your listing. And you're like, okay, 100 there, and I got, let's just say you got 10 clicks. So that'd be a 10% click-through rate, which would be amazing. But you didn't get any sales. Okay. And you're looking at that and you're like, if I could just get more views, then I could get more clicks. Right. But is that product yielding enough of those? Or is there potential for that product to get that amount of views? So it always comes down to the research up front. So you have to look at like the research that you did. If it's getting, if it's getting 100 sales a month, okay, then you have to look at it and go, okay, how many sales would you have to have? And then you have to kind of work it backwards, is what I'm saying. And so if you're looking at your demand and you're not happy with your demand, then you have to ask yourself, was I over or was I underestimating what it could actually do? So hopefully that made sense, but you really have to look at the target that you're shooting for, and then look at the product that you used as your validation. And then you need to kind of go back to yours and go, oh yeah, that's pretty much all that I can expect, right? Because it's only getting 100 views, but so are they, So that's kind of how I would reverse engineer that. So hopefully that made sense. It sounded like I made it a little bit more confusing than it needed to be, Chris.
Rough rule of thumb, 1%, right? 1% click-through rate, 1% conversion rate would be kind of the bargain basement of where we want to see those things. If you're getting less than that, then we're doing something wrong somewhere. If we're getting less than 1% click-through rate, it's probably our image or the keywords that we're being shown for. If we're getting less than a 1% conversion rate, look at your title, image, description. Probably ignore tags at that point. Once you've verified the traffic is valid, it's a listing problem. We're not correctly communicating what we're selling to the buyer.
Yep. Cool. All right, guys, I think that's going to wrap it up. This was like again, one of those Friday editions that we were going to make this about e-commerce news in general. Not saying that Etsy isn't, but we already cover a lot of stuff in our Etsy Wednesday live stream edition. But today, because this was so new, and it was more or less breaking news because they released it, we wanted to make sure that we got it out to you as soon as possible. So this way here, you were aware of it, but you also understood a little bit more about the suspensions, a little bit more about their policies, their IP, how to protect yourself, because there are some things in there. There are some clues in there that we were able to unpack and hopefully help you. Yeah, hopefully you got something out of this. If you guys enjoyed this, like this, smash the like button. if you would do us a favor and comment on this, let us know what was your biggest takeaway. And then if you have not yet responded or commented and liked the video that we are trying to get attention of Etsy through this video with Josh Silverman, the CEO, make sure that you visit the description and then you click on that video, and it is a direct call out to Josh Silverman, the CEO of Etsy and Etsy themselves. And if just someone can see it, we might be on our way to getting someone that we can talk to and that we can get some real answers, or at least take those questions and bring them back and get some answers from those people. So make sure that you do that. That's your homework for the weekend. Make sure that you go to that video, like it, comment on it, and then that way there, it'll keep the momentum going on that video. All right. So that is it. That's going to wrap it up. As always, take care, take action, have an awesome, amazing day, and we'll see you right back here